Nate?
I did, yeah, absolutely.
Okay. All right, yeah, I didn't get to do last week because we had those 3 breaks. Wait, were you in on last week?
I was.
Okay. All right, so going along with this Roman study, this is not a sidebar. I would like us to listen to just the first 2 pages of a book by CSLewis. Has anybody read A Pilgrim's Regress?
I did, but a long time ago.
Okay. I would really suggest, especially after we do this Roman series, okay, to go and, try to find a copy of this book. The one I thought I had, I must have loaned out somewhere along the lines when we were still doing studies upstairs, because I could not find it anywhere, and I have no clue who I borrowed it to.
I thought I owned it too, and I couldn't find my copy. So.
Yeah. So, but under the understanding of Romans, because you'll see that because of certain phrases and terms and pictures that C.S. Lewis uses, you really see that he understands the book of Romans as we're trying to open up and understand, in these studies. So, without any further ado, here we go.
Sorry, Robert.
I dreamed of a boy.
What's the name of that book?
A Pilgrim's Regress.
Okay.
All right, so as it opens up, it's just, it's interesting that some people take this to be an autobiographical account of C.S. Lewis. Now, it's not ever been, said by Lewis himself that is the truth, but because of people knowing things about his life, when they read it, they kind of pointed to the idea of, wait a second, that was C.S. Lewis's life. And there's one chapter, I won't give it away to you now, but there's one chapter where he encounters a little friend in the woods. Very interesting that, found in, the story?
I'm actually reading the story about a guy that was in the woods. He was in the woods,
About what?
A guy that was in the woods. He was, in the woods, by himself.
What was his name? Hawthorne?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was yeah.
A little bit different, but. Okay, chapter 1. The Rules is what it's titled.
He was born in the land of Puritania, and his name was John. And I dreamed that when John was able to walk, he ran out of his parents' garden on a fine morning onto the road. And on the other side of the road there was a deep wood, but not thick, full of primroses and soft green moss. When John set eyes on this, he thought he had never seen anything so beautiful, and he ran across the road and into the wood, and was just about to go down on his hands and knees and pull up the primroses by handfuls, when his mother came running out of the garden gate, and she also ran across the road and caught John up and smacked him soundly and told him he must never go into the wood again. And John cried, but he asked no questions, for he was not yet at the age for asking questions. Then a year went past, and then another fine morning, John had a little sling, and he went out into the garden, and he saw a bird sitting on a branch. And John got his sling ready and was going to have a shot at the bird when the cook came running out of the garden and caught John up and smacked him soundly and told him he must never kill any of the birds in the garden. "Why?" said John. "Because the steward would be very angry," said Cook. "Who is the steward?" said John. "He's the man who makes rules for all the country round here," said Cook. "Why?" said John. "Because the landlord set him to do it." "Who is the landlord?" said John. "He owns all the country," said the cook. "Why?" said John. And when he asked this, the cook went and told his mother. And his mother sat down and talked to John about the landlord all afternoon, but John took none of it in, for he was not yet at the age for taking it in. Then a year went past, and one dark, cold, wet morning John was made to put on new clothes. They were the ugliest clothes that had ever been put upon him, which John did not mind at all, but they also caught him under the chin, and were tight under the arms, which he minded a great deal, and they made him itch all over. And his father and mother took him out along the road, one holding him by each hand, which was uncomfortable too, and very unnecessary, and told him they were taking him to see the steward. The steward lived in a big dark house of stone on the side of the road. The father and mother went in to talk to the steward first, and John was left sitting in the hall on a chair so high that his feet did not reach the floor. There were other chairs in the hall where he could have sat in comfort, but his father had told him that the steward would be angry if he did not sit absolutely still and be very good, and John was beginning to be afraid. So he sat still in the high chair with his feet dangling, and his clothes itching all over him, and his eyes starting out of his head. After a very long time his parents came back again, looking as if they had been with the doctor, very grave. Then they said that John must go in and see the steward too. And when John came into the room, there was an old man with a red, round face who was very kind and full of jokes, so that John quite got over his fears. And they had a good talk about fishing tackle and bicycles. But just when the talk was at its best, the steward got up and cleared his throat. He then took down a mask from the wall with a long white beard attached to it, and suddenly clapped it on his face, so that his appearance was awful. And he said, "Now I'm going to talk to you about the landlord. The landlord owns all the country, and it is very, very kind of him to allow us to live on in it at all. Very, very kind." He went on repeating, "very kind," in a queer sing-song voice, so long that John would have laughed. But now he was beginning to be frightened again. The steward then took down from a peg a big card with small print all over it and said, "Here is a list of all the things the landlord says you must not do. You'd better look at it." So John took the card. But half the rules seemed to forbid things he had never heard of, and the other half forbade things he was doing every day and could not imagine not doing. And the number of the rules was so enormous that he felt he could never remember them all. "I hope," said the steward, "that you have not already broken any of the rules." John's heart began to thump, and his eyes bulged more and more, and he was at his wits' end when the steward took the mask off and looked at John with his real face and said, "Better tell a lie, old chap, better tell a lie. Easiest for all concerned," and popped the mask on his face all in a flash. John gulped and said quickly, "Oh, no, sir." "That is just as well," said the steward through the mask, "because, you know, if you did break any of them and the landlord got to know of it, do you know what he'd do to you?" "No, sir," said John. And the steward's eyes seemed to be twinkling dreadfully through the holes of the mask. "He'd take you and shut you up for ever and ever in a black hole full of snakes and scorpions as large as lobsters, for ever and ever. And besides that, he is such a kind, good man, so very, very kind, that I am sure you would never want to displease him." "No, sir," said John, "but please, sir." "Well," said the steward. "Please, sir, supposing I did break one little one, just by accident, you know, could nothing stop the snakes and lobsters?" "Ah," said the steward. And then he sat down and talked for a long time. But John could not understand a single syllable. However, it all ended with pointing out that the landlord was quite extraordinarily kind and good to his tenants, and would certainly torture most of them to death the moment he had the slightest pretext. "And you can't blame him," said the steward, "for after all, it is his land, and it is so very good of him to let us live here at all, people like us, you know." Then the steward took off the mask and had a nice, sensible chat with John again, and gave him a cake and brought him out to his father and mother. But just as they were going, he bent down and whispered in John's ear, "I shouldn't bother about it all too much if I were you." At the same time, he slipped the card of rules into John's hand and told him he could keep it for his own use. 2.
Okay. So that was chapter 1 of this book. You can actually find it on YouTube. It's a really interesting story. Anybody have any feelings about any of the, descriptions that were given about what it could mean? Or even just the whole story in general? Think about the book of Romans, what we've been talking about, and how today we're going to kind of start touching on the idea of this covenantal nomism, where we're taught what to wear, how to talk, what to do so that we can fit into the club. Okay, does that draw any ideas from what you just heard?
Yeah. When he was saying about the raggedy clothes and stuff, and how he said something about being in a chair and you couldn't move and all that, else he do something. I'm not really paying attention, but how he was saying, I had to stay still sitting in the chair, so he used to sit in the chair, itching because of his clothes and all that.
Very good. Anybody else? Anything?
the literally two-faced
Pastor,
guy.
teacher of the law.
Yeah. The steward, that was the term that they used.
Yeah.
Was kind of a profound touch, and I feel like even those people who honestly desire to honor God and honestly love others, that must be how that comes across to a lot of non-Christians.
Oh, you guys are good tonight. I love it.
Even the good pastors come off that way.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, let alone any bad ones.
Trying to find that one little thing that he said. Oh, there we go. So, could nothing stop the snakes and the lobsters? Ah, said the steward. And then he sat down and talked for a long time. But John could not understand a single syllable. Okay, so again, there we have it. It's very hard to teach something if you don't really understand it. And that's why, like, this book of Romans, there are very few teachers out there that will teach what it really means because they themselves have never really been taught what it really is. And a lot of it does go against, the idea of faith and works in the church. Because something that we don't know anything about unless you've studied early Christianity is that from about the year 75 AD to about 150, there's this big dark period where we don't have very much of anything on anything that was going on. And the Bible kind of leaves us with the clue that there was an argument between Paul and
The Gnostics?
yeah, but more in the book of Acts.
Oh.
Anybody?
Oh, the Judaizers.
Yes. James from Jerusalem coming up. What's the one verse? I think it's in Galatians chapter 3, where the spies are sent in to basically take a look and see if they're circumcised or not. Okay, you guys remember that? Let me see. Oh, you know what? I tagged it in that. But let me see if I can find it real quick here. Hey, can somebody Google it for me?
What do you need?
It's working for now.
Okay, so Galatians 2, verse 3, "Yet not even Titus, who was with me, was compelled to be circumcised, even though he was a Greek. This matter arose because some false brothers had infiltrated our ranks to spy on the freedom that we have in Jesus Christ to make us slaves or to put us in bondage." So, what he's saying is that, and actually it's interesting that that word that they translate to spy on, it actually is a word that means to press in close by the side. So while he was going to the washroom, somebody pressed up really close next to him to see what was going on with him. Okay? So that was the extent that these church people were going to see if you had the marks of being one of them. Okay? And so what Paul says at the end of that is that they were trying to drag us back to bondage, okay, to the law. All right, so continuing with our study tonight, we'll pick up at verse 11, okay?
That's cool.
What was that?
Look at him.
Huh?
Who's that verse 11?
Verse 11 on our sheets, second
Thank you.
page. We did cover it last week. I just want to reiterate from verse 11 that for there is no respect of persons with God. Okay? So Paul sets up everything that he's about to start talking about with this little statement that God is no respecters of persons. So no matter how big and mighty you think you are, to God, we're all equal. Okay, for as many who have sinned without the law shall perish without the law, and as many as have sinned in the law shall be judged by the law.
Rob, I remember doing this one last week.
Right, I'm just recovering. Okay, so third sheet. Just reiterating the fact that with God, that no one, he is not a respecter of people. Okay, so here we have in verse 13, for not the hearers of the law are just before God, but the doers of the law shall be justified. Okay? So, you know, some of the Jews that he would have been talking to, they pride themselves on their ability to fulfill the law. Okay? So right now, you know, he's kind of giving them some props. All right? With this one little statement, they're, you know, if you are a person who lives by the law and works very, you know, adamantly against doing anything contrary to the law, then, you know, you're going to hear that and you go, yes, I will be justified by the fact that I am a doer of the law. Okay? Can somebody look up Luke 11:28?
I got it. Let me just find it.
Dang.
Huh.
He had it so fast.
He's looking it up.
Oh.
Yeah.
I was like, dang, I just hit the home button. I didn't even get to it.
11 what?
11:28.
He replied, Blessed rather are those who hear the word of God and obey it.
There we go. So again, we have this idea that there's something with hearing and obeying. Okay? Not just the hearing of. For the hearer, it is not for the hearers of the law that are just before God, but those that are doing the law. Okay? Now, this could almost be equated with people today. You know, I can remember actually, literally, someone saying to me something about how she had gone to church every day since she was a young girl. Her mom and dad had been two of the people that founded this church, that she's got a mansion waiting for her in heaven, but it was nothing necessarily about her life and her faith work. It was all on the merits of her going to church every Sunday, hearing everything that was being taught, but yet did it reflect also in her lifestyle, you know? Or did she have a false hope? You know, because again, we always have to be looking at our own lives to see, are we going to end up in heaven? And when God said, you know, when we say, but Lord, look at all the wonderful things we've done in your name, and, you know, we don't want to be one of the people that he says, I never knew you. Okay? All right, so verse 14. For when the Gentiles, which have not the law, do by nature the things contained in the law, these having not the law are a law unto themselves. Okay? So, you know, what Paul is saying here is that, you know, they do not have this set of rules given by God that says, do not steal. But yet something in their own nature, something inside of them tells them that it is not right to do that. Father David was talking about how, you know, in the Hebrew tradition, there was a law that said, do not sleep with your mother. But yet, interestingly, in the Babylonian tradition, they didn't have a law like that. Okay, and it wasn't because it was allowed, it was because that was an unthinkable thing. That to them, that would have never been done. But for God to make this a law for the people that he chose, obviously, there was somebody along the lines that did that. You know, we just don't make laws to make laws. Laws come from something that has happened. You know? So just keep that in mind. When you read some of these things, you're just like, wow, they really had to tell somebody not to do that? You know, and that's also the other reason, you know, there are sometimes people who don't believe in the Bible, who don't want to believe in God, that say that there's nothing in the scriptures about having to tell you that, you know, a father is not to sleep with his daughter. But yet again, in the ancient mind, that, however, was something that was not a thinkable thing. Okay? That was not something that anybody would have done, so there wasn't a law needed for that. And then if you remember the one case that it does happen, or one of the cases where it does happen, Lot and his two daughters, after the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, they get him drunk, and they're, kind of to their, what would you call it, their shame, their names are not given at all. Their names have been erased from history because they did something that was shameful, that there wasn't even a law about, but they did something that was shameful. Okay, and so that's one of the reasons why they're not named. Okay, so going on. In the pulpit commentary on this idea, the law of the conscience, the pulpit commentary says that if a Gentile, not knowing the Ten Commandments, refrains from stealing, they are conscientiously honest and will have their own reward compared to the Jew who refrains in obedience to the revealed command. Okay, so now that's a very interesting idea, that to the one who doesn't have to be told, do not do this, that they are actually in a better place than the one who does it out of obedience, that just refrain from the very get-go. Go ahead.
I don't know. I'm not sure how to put this, but that seems like that's the sort of thing that could easily lead to a lot of self-pride and self-righteousness in terms of like, oh, I didn't even have to be told that. I mean, because it was so obvious.
Yeah, it definitely could. But the fact that if that is being written by God on their conscience,
Okay.
Remember that idea of God giving them an uncircumcised heart, putting the law written upon their heart? So if it's God that's doing it, there's less likely of a chance of that pride to creep in.
Okay.
Still definitely could be there, especially if you're a Gentile that did not ever steal because you just knew it was wrong from the get-go, and then you read something like this and you go, hey, I'm in a better place than all of you guys who had to get told not to steal, But yeah, there's always that possibility for pride to set in, but yeah, if it's written by God, there's definitely less of a chance. All right, verse 14, okay? Which shows the work of their law written in their hearts, their conscience also bearing witness, and their thoughts the mean while accusing or else excusing one another. Okay, that word that they say, accusing or else excusing, the accusing, you guys see that it's on the third line of the Greek, fourth one over. Do you guys see that prefix, kata, again? All right, so it's just like idea of this intense accusing. Okay. All right. Do you guys remember Apollo or Apollos from the New Testament in the book of Acts?
Yeah.
Chapter 18. Who wants to look it up for me? Let's read that. Acts 18:24. All right. Somebody find that for me, and then I'm going to keep reading this next verse. So, in the day when God shall judge the secrets of men by Jesus Christ according to my gospel. Now, that's kind of interesting. He calls it his gospel. Does anybody have an idea as why he would call it his gospel?
Because he wrote it? Because it was written for them?
No.
It's written on behalf of Jesus, I guess.
Well, he doesn't imply that. He just says let's see here. Judge the secrets of men by Jesus Christ according to my gospel. Because that's a tripping point for some people when they see that. Okay? Some people will allude to the idea that there is this gospel of Marcion going around, okay? Where he had the idea that there was an Old Testament evil God, and this Jesus was this New Testament good God that loved us and was coming to save us from that Old Testament evil God. All right, now unfortunately, remember I told you a little bit earlier about that fight, the argument, the blackout of information between 75 and about 150 AD. Well, it's because of Marcion. All right, Marcion started cutting and pasting together scriptures that he thought were, the word. And he started pushing this idea of this evil Old Testament God, this New Testament good God, which still prevails to this day, You know, you still see, you know, I still hear people say that the God of the Old Testament is this evil God, you know, and the God of the New Testament, Jesus, is this hippie loving God. Okay, and I always point out that Jeremiah chapter 3, where we really see this broken heart of God when His people, you know, basically commit adultery against Him. All right, so we have that Acts verse 18.
Sure.
Okay.
Which verse specifically?
18,
24.
24, right?
Oh.
Now a certain Jew named Apollos, an Alexandrian by the grace, and eloquent man, came to Ephesus. He was mighty in the scriptures.
Okay, read another verse for me.
This man had been instructed in the way of the Lord, and being a fervent in spirit, he spake and taught accurate things concerning Jesus, knowing only the baptism of John. Keep going.
All right. What?
I was going to say, keep going.
You could read one more.
And he began to speak boldly in the synagogue. But when Priscilla and Aquila heard him, they took unto them and expounded unto him the way of God more accurately.
Okay, so he was going around preaching a gospel, all right? And, you know, if you kind of follow where he was from, they give us that information. Where he was traveling and preaching this gospel that John was talking about, this coming Messiah. Okay? Everything he was saying was true, but what ended up happening it was that he missed the whole thing of the resurrection. And so now Aquila and Priscilla take him aside and they teach him the things of the resurrection and what Christ was talking about and this gospel. Okay? So there's another gospel that was floating around at this time. We have the Marcion beliefs, and then we have the crowd of James that was saying that it was by your works. And by the works that you do, that's what proves that you are who you say you are. Okay? By wearing these clothes, by acting this way, by dressing this way, by showing up to church every Sunday, that by these you'll be known to be a true Christian. Okay? Okay, 17. Oh, the other thing too, that word my that he uses, it just actually, the literal in the Greek would translate it, the gospel committed to me to preach. Okay? And all we kind of shorten it down in our English to just my gospel. When in actuality it is the gospel committed to me to preach. Okay, verse 17. Behold, thou art called a Jew, and restest in the law, and makest thy boast of God. Okay? So now a little bit more English translation. Now if you call yourself a Jew, and you are trusting in the law, okay, and proudly boast of God. Alright, that's a little bit more clear. So if you go around calling yourself a Jew, and you are trusting, alright, that's the word that they're saying, in restest, okay, resting, but trusting is the actual word. So trusting in the law, you make, and then you boast in God. Going on, you know, this is the more English translation. You know what he wants. You know what is right because you have been taught his law. Okay, somebody look up Isaiah 42:20 and Matthew 23:3.
I'll do Matthew.
All right, so Isaiah
what?
Isaiah 42:20.
Did you want to do it, Michael? Matthew what?
Matthew 23, verse 3.
Isaiah what?
Isaiah 42, verse 20. Hey, Michael, if you want to look up John 9, 39 through 41, that'll be for the next verse.
Sorry, Michael, this thing's fast. I kind of am enjoying this thing.
Well, the next time you take the first verse. You find Isaiah?
Yeah.
All right, give me Isaiah 42, verse 20.
You have seen many things, but you have paid no attention. Your ears are open, but you hear nothing.
All right, so now here's something being prophesied about this time. And then here we have Paul reiterating this Old Testament verse to a new generation of people who had not yet heard this. Okay? You know what he wants. You know what is right because you have been taught the law. All right, and then the Matthew verse.
All things, therefore, whoever they bid you, do and observe, but do not ye after their works, for they say and do not.
All right, so now did you guys catch that one? That's a very interesting one. Jesus himself says, listen to them. Listen to what they are telling you, for it is right. But do not do as they do. Because what they do is contrary to what they know is right. And then here we have Paul telling us the very same thing. You know what he wants. You know what is right because you have been taught his law. And then going on to verse 19. And you are confident in that you yourself are a guide of the blind. That you are convinced that you can guide the blind. And you are a light of them that is in darkness. Okay? Alright, John 9:39 and 41 through 41.
Jesus said, "For judgment I have come into this world, so that the blind will see, and those who see will become blind." Some Pharisees who were with him heard him say this and asked, "What? Are we blind too?" Jesus said, if you were blind, you would not be guilty of sin. But now that you claim you can see, your guilt remains.
So that's kind of deep. Jesus was giving them the chance to just say, okay, you're blind too. And they did not accept that. They said, what? We have been taught the law since we were young. We do and fulfill everything of the law. And Jesus says, you are blind. Okay, verse 20. An instructor of the foolish and a teacher of babes, or unlearned, unenlightened, or unskilled, which has the form of knowledge, so not just a form, but the resemblance, okay, or taking on the resemblance of something. So they have this taking on the resemblance of knowledge and of the truth and the law. All right, Galatians 4:18 and 19.
No, you gotta find 18. But it is good to be zealous, sought in good manner of all times, and not only when I am present with you. My little children, of whom I am again travail until Christ be formed in you.
Read it one more time, a little bit louder.
But it is good to be zealously sought in good manner at all times, and not only when I am present with you. My little children, of whom I am again in travail until Christ be formed in you.
All right, so you guys heard that. Paul is telling the Galatian church, don't just be good little kids while I'm there with you. All right? Be good even when I'm not around. Do what is right even when I'm not there to tell you that it's right. And then what was the next part?
That was about the
What's 19?
19. My little children, of whom I am again in travail until Christ be formed in you.
There you go. Okay, so with that, now that, like anyone who is like a mentoring person, and like I will admit, like truthfully and honestly, even with me, that every time I see a little seed of truth starting to take plant in someone, okay, and from the beginning of this series, like I have been overly blessed with knowledge of when you guys start saying things about understanding these words more fully, then there I am in this travail, hoping that these seeds take root, that you'll be freed from the chains that you have had since little, and see that there truly is freedom in Christ. Okay, just like Paul talked about in the Galatian letter just earlier, in chapter 2, that we are free, truly free in Christ. Okay? Okay. Thou therefore, verse 21, thou therefore, which teachest another, teachest not yourself? You teachest a man should not steal, but do you steal? Psalm 50, verse 17. And then I need First Samuel. Oh, I better look up this one because it's a little hopping around.
Psalm 50.
Psalm 50, verse 17. And then somebody could look up Joshua 11:6 for me. You got Psalm 50?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, 17.
Seeing thou hatest instruction and castest my words behind me.
Alright, so they're hearing what God wants, and instead of the proverbial going in one ear and out the other, even more so than that, they're hearing the words are hitting them, they're grabbing them and just throwing them behind them, kind of like, don't even need that. Okay?
Joshua what?
Joshua 11:6. We don't need that for about another minute or two.
Okay, I was just wondering and gonna pull it up.
Okay, verse 22. Thou that sayest a man should not commit adultery, do you also commit adultery? Thou that abhorrest idols, do you commit sacrilege? Alright, now that one has to be corrected a little bit to the English. It is that you condemn idolatry, but do you use the stolen items from pagan temples? Alright, that was what the idea was trying to get across here. So you condemn idolatry yourself, but you yourself use stolen items that come from pagan temples. Okay? And that idea of that sacrilege, the last one commits sacrilege, it is basically to rob and to seize, but it's usually associated with spoils of war. Okay? Now, can you guys think of another time in history where there was a king of God's people who, during times of war, did something similar to this? Nope. Nate, can you think of one?
No.
How about King Saul? Does anybody remember the story?
Oh, yeah.
When he was fighting against the...
Philistines?
No, the ones that mean bloodthirsty vampires. Transliteration. Starts with an A.
Amorites.
No.
Ammonites?
Close.
Amalekites.
Amalekites, yes. Alright, so that's what the 1 Samuel chapter 15. Alright, I'm going to read it. This is kind of just the story. So God says, go into this land and annihilate everything. Okay, do not take anything for your own personal spoil. Okay? Alright, so verse 9. But Saul and his army spared Agag, he was their king, and the best of the sheep and the cattle, the fat calves, the lambs, everything that was good. These they were unwilling to destroy completely, but everything that was despised and weak they totally destroyed. Okay, so in their own eyes, all right, they went into this land, and what they saw as something good, God says there's nothing good in this land. Do not take anything with you. Okay? So again, now they go into this and they see all these wonderful sheep. And they go, hey, that could feed us for a long time. Now just subtitle this, why do we really need this God? We could take care of ourselves. Look at all this cattle. Look at all this sheep. Look at all this gold. Who needs your God? Verse 10. Then the word of the Lord came to Samuel. I am grieved that I have made Saul a king, because he has turned away from me and has not carried out my instructions. All right. Samuel was troubled, and he cried out to the Lord all night. Early in the morning, Samuel got up and went to meet Saul. And he was told, Saul has gone to Carmel. There he has set up a monument to his own honor and has turned and gone down to Gilgal. When Samuel reached him, Saul said, "The Lord bless you. I have carried out the Lord's instructions." But Samuel said, "What then is this bleating of sheep in my ears? What is this lowing of cattle that I hear?" Saul answered, "The soldiers brought them from the Amalekites. They spared the best of the sheep and the cattle to sacrifice to the Lord, but we totally destroyed the rest." "Stop," Samuel said to Saul. "Let me tell you what the Lord said to me last night." "Tell me," Saul replied. Samuel said, "Although you were once small in your own eyes, you did not become the head of all the tribes of Israel. The Lord anointed you king over Israel, and he sent you on a mission, saying, 'Go and completely destroy those wicked people, the Amalekites. Make war on them until you have wiped them out.' Why did you not obey the Lord? Why did you pounce on the plunder and do evil in the eyes of the Lord?" "But I did obey the Lord," Saul said. "I went on this mission, and the Lord assigned me. I completely destroyed the Amalekites and brought back Agag, their king. The soldiers took the sheep and cattle from the plunder. The best was devoted to God in order to sacrifice them to the Lord at Gilgal." But Samuel replied, Does the Lord delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as much as in obeying the voice of the Lord? Now here we have it again, what I've been talking about quite a bit. Okay? Remember that study we did about what is a real sacrifice? What is a real gift to God? Okay? And it's not things of material. It's obey. You hear the word of the Father and you obey. As much as obeying the voice of the Lord, to obey is better than sacrifice, and to heed is better than the fat of rams. Okay, so let that sink in. All right, Joshua 11:6. Okay.
And Joshua, and the Lord said to Joshua, "Be not afraid because of them, for tomorrow about this time will I deliver them up all slain before Israel, before Israel thou shalt
You got it or not, but
I have.
what is the first drop?
You're getting a weird word that I don't even know how to pronounce, but the word in NIV is hamstring.
Yeah, that's the word I was looking for. What version do you have?
He's looking at King James at the
Oh,
moment.
yeah.
Yeah.
Grab a Bible right there in the first Bible.
I have an
Okay,
NIV in
use
front of me. I'm just using my phone because it's a little faster to find.
Do you
Try
have
to
this
change it.
Bible app that I just downloaded on the tablet?
All right, so let me read this verse
No, I
11:6
have
here.
one that I cannot find.
The Lord said to Joshua, "Do not be afraid of them, because at this time tomorrow I will hand all of them over to Israel, slain. You are to hamstring their horses and burn their chariots." Okay, so does anybody have any idea why God would tell? Do you guys know what that is, first of all? To hamstring a horse?
Oh, hello.
Hi, Mia.
You guys come on in. Hey, what's happening?
Wow, man.
Long
How's
time
life
no
treating
see.
you, man? How's
Not
life
too
treating
bad.
you?
Hey, Nate, do you know what it is to hamstring a horse? Careful, he's on.
Don't sit on Nate.
Good, you can sit right there.
You can sit next to Kaylin.
I think I do, but I can't think of it right now.
Okay, anybody have an idea what it is?
Hamstringing a horse? don't you, like, basically cut the horse's hamstrings so they're not able to
go to war. They can still be used for other things, but like they're not. They can't be used for war, for heavy, intensive anything. Okay.
Oh. So it doesn't actually. So it's actually not even killing them.
No, it's not killing them.
Oh, that's.
It's just maiming them.
Okay. Huh.
Okay. And so now, you guys, there's actually a verse there's a reason behind that, why God tells them to do that. Alright? So now you can see, here was a chance for Joshua to what? To obey God and do what he said, even though it didn't make any sense, because Joshua was going to see all these fine horses, even the king's horse, and say, really, I have to hamstring this animal? Alright? The reason being is that before this, God says that I will send you into this land. You will be able to encounter enemies, and you will conquer every single one of them, and you will not have anything added to you. Okay? And that's why God tells him to hamstring the horses. Because otherwise, Joshua could have added to his number. And so then what happens to the people in their pride? They say, look at how strong we've grown. We've got 10,000 more horses. We've got 10,000 more chariots. But instead, God used that same amount of his people to go through every city and take them out. Okay? So that they would know it wasn't by their strength, but it was by the strength of God that was behind them. Okay.
So how is that King James word pronounced? H-O-U-G-H.
H-O-U-H. Hugh? Hugh? Yeah. We have to Google it to see. Hugh. Yeah.
H-O-U-G-H.
But yeah, hamstring was the one I'm looking for.
That's off topic. Go ahead.
But again, like, if you came across that verse.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. That's why, I use the King James because it's easily corrected. There are so many different resources that we can use with the King James, very easily corrected. Okay, verse 23. Thou that makest thy boast in the law, through breaking the law, you dishonorest thou God? Alright, kind of in a little better English. You who are so proud in the knowing of the law, but you dishonor God by breaking it. Okay, a little more in plain English. So let me do it again. You who are so proud in knowing the law, but you dishonor God by breaking it. Okay, verse 24.
It's actually a Scottish word that means hamstring.
Oh, it's a Scottish word?
Mm-hmm.
Huh.
Why it's in the King James Bible? No clue, but...
It was a dominant word at the time, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, for the name of God is blasphemed among the Gentiles through you, as it is written. Okay? More literally, the as it is written would have been put first. So, as it is written, the name of God is blasphemed among the Gentiles because of you. Alright, that blasphemed is refusing to acknowledge good, speaking evil against. Can somebody look up Isaiah 52 verse 5?
Sure.
Because that's actually the verse that Paul's referencing here. Okay?
Now therefore, what do I hear, saith Jehovah, seeing that my people is taken away for naught, that they rule over them, do howl, say Jehovah and my name continuously, all the day is blasphemed.
Can you guys think of how this applies to anything today? Or maybe 1,000 ways that it applies today?
What, OMG?
No. Not necessarily that. I'm just saying that because of people who boast in knowing what God wants, but then they break what God really wants.
Well, all the health and wealth preachers out there that
Say
are
90%
collecting
of
more and more
Christians.
money.
90%, wow. Could be.
Gene Scott's wife.
You wouldn't throw that one in. They said Gene Scott's wife, long story. But, unless you look it up. But, it always reminds me of back when I first heard that one song by, I think it was Jars of Clay or one of them, What If I Stumble, What If I Fall? Was that Jars of Clay?
That was,
That's DC Talk.
DC Talk, yes, DC Talk. The very beginning, they have that, he's an ex-priest, Manning, and at the very beginning it has him saying something along the lines of that the number one cause of atheism in America today are Christians that acknowledge Jesus with their lips, but they go on living their lives exactly how they want to, and that's what an unbelieving world find simply unbelievable. Not perfectly, but pretty much
that
you
was
get the gist.
very, very close.
Very close. When I first heard that, it so struck a chord with me. I ran around, because I was at a place that was a Christian work environment. I ran around to like everyone, and I was like, check this out. And I think I was playing it on like a little CD Walkman, you know, whatever the CD Walkman thing was. I'm like, here, listen to this. This man, that's the one. So I had my little plug-in speakers, and I'm like, I made sure everybody heard that. And it was funny, all these people who were claiming to be Christian, that when they heard that, they were like, yeah, that's nice, Bob. It just like, it wowed me that nobody like really understood what was being really said there, that it is your walk that shows the world who God is. And like, most people, I don't think anybody that day cared about that. You know, not at all. Me, I was just ecstatic, like, wow, people are watching me and judging God on that? So here we have Paul, way back in the day here, 2,000 years ago, saying, for the name of God is blasphemed among all the world because of you, as it was written all the way back with Isaiah. So like that should really sink in and really make you reflect on how is it that the world is perceiving God when I run around saying, hey, I'm a Christian, I'm a Christian, I'm a Christian. But yet Monday, right after church, Monday morning, Monday afternoon, I'm hitting the bars up and acting a fool. But yet everybody knows me as this Christian guy, you know? Really, what is that as for an example? Hey, we're going to actually finish chapter 2 tonight.
Yep.
We got one page left. Okay. Yeah, I told you, once we got through that first chapter was going to be hardest. We had like, what, 7 parts? We're thinking on our third part for this, so that we're getting, or no, second part.
Yeah, we started it.
Yeah, I think we started last week, so second part.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, so, verse 25. For circumcision verily profiteth if thou keep the law, but if you are a breaker of the law, then circumcision is made uncircumcision. Or a little bit better, you know, for circumcision is good if you keep the law. But if you are a breaker of the law, then you become as though you had not been circumcised.
There we are.
Okay?
I'm like, where is this first one coming from?
Yeah, that's the more English translation for today. All right. As far as the Greek, the words are all okay on that one. Can somebody look up Jeremiah 4:4? And then Jeremiah 9:25. Call it out so we don't have everybody looking up the same one.
Hey, next one.
4:4.
You got it? Okay. 9:25.
And you said Jeremiah 4:4?
Jeremiah.
Okay.
Wow.
Me and Kaylin have 9:25.
That's
if
Nate.
You want it.
I know.
Oh yeah, he came back on the screen. Sounded like you were like juggling silverware a little while ago.
Yeah.
Hello now, Nate.
I was eating
Cereal,
cereal.
yeah, that does sound really noisy actually, especially first thing in the morning.
Sorry, I didn't realize that.
That's okay. All right, who's got Jeremiah 4:4? One of my favorite prophets.
I read it.
Are you sure? Any big words that you can't read? Okay. Michael, do you have it?
I have it in IAV.
Good.
So, whatever she put it on.
Did you switch it to that translation after it was finished downloading?
All right, Jeremiah
Anyway.
4:4. Deal with that later.
Circumcise yourselves to the Lord. Circumcise your hearts, you men of Judah and people of Jerusalem. Or my wrath will break out and burn like fire because of the evil you have done. Burn with no one to quench it.
So now, can you just put yourself in this place that, let's just say, there's a nice little Christian convention, and any one of you decided, hey, you know what, I got this message from God, and you walk in there, and you tell them, you know, well, if everybody there believed in circumcision, let's just say that you walk in there and say, you know what, forget the circumcision of the flesh, circumcise your hearts to God. Now, can you just imagine, like, they would, like, stone you, and in fact, Jeremiah got a few beatings in his life. You know, that's why he's like one of my favorites, because he kept on doing it, even though he didn't, I don't know, he didn't really want to, but like he was definitely called to that. All right, 9:25.
God put some heavy burdens on him too.
Oh, Jeremiah for sure. Yeah, in fact, in one of the apocryphal or extra biblical texts, he was actually betrothed, and that's when God says, "Hey, remember that dream you had when you were a little boy? Yeah, you're mine. You are not going to be getting married." You know, so I mean, there's the first one right off the bat. Like, he comes to him when he was about 10 years old, and he has this like dream where God will put His words into his mouth as a 10-year-old. Jonah, how old are you?
12.
12. Okay, you.
She's going to be 9 this year, so
All right,
pretty
so like
close.
a little girl like this, and in this dream, God says, "I will put my words in your mouth." And then you forget about that. You grow up. You go away to high school. You go away. Well, not really back then, but you know, you're going to college, and you meet this wonderful girl, and all of a sudden you want to marry her. You're going to go talk to her father, and then on that road to her father's house, God shows up and says, "Jeremiah, how do you know my name? I came to you a long time ago, and I said I will put my words in your mouth, and now is that time." Wow. That was his life. So, like, kids complain today. I complain today. You know, I'm just saying about how unfair things are. Jeremiah had a
Unfair
little
that
bit.
they have to dry dishes.
Drying dishes, yeah, the most worst, horrible thing.
The most horrible tray in the world.
Anyway.
All right, so moving on to verse 26. Therefore, if the uncircumcised, now remember that, now this is Paul talking to those that are the Jewish house in Rome. All right, he starts out saying this idea that gives them this pretense that, yes, I am a keeper of the law. I will be justified in that. And now ever since then, he's saying, you know what, you do this, but you don't do it with your heart. All right? So, therefore, if the uncircumcised keep the righteousness of the law, shall not the uncircumcised be counted for circumcision? All right? Or won't God declare them his own people? All right, is what he's trying to say by that idea of counting them as circumcised, because that was that covenant, if you remember. So with that covenant, he's saying that I will make them my own people because they kept the law more than the ones who had the show of the covenant. Okay? 24, and shall not the uncircumcised, which is by nature fulfilling the law, shall judge you. Somebody look up Matthew 12:41.
You never had me read Jeremiah 9:25.
9:25? I didn't? Oh. All right, hold on. Pause. 9:25. Give it to me.
Behold, the days come, says the Lord, that I will punish all of them which are circumcised with uncircumcision.
Read that one more time.
Behold, the days come, says the Lord, that I will punish all of them which are circumcised with the uncircumcised.
So he will punish the circumcised who do not have the circumcised heart with those who are Gentile or uncircumcised. Okay? Matthew 12:41. All right, in verse 27, and shall not the uncircumcised, which is by nature fulfilling the law, shall judge you, who by the letter or the writing and circumcision do rebel against or transgress, rebel against the law? So God's basically saying here, or Paul's basically saying that, you know, will not the uncircumcised judge you for what you know to be the truth? All right, Matthew 12:41. Back it up with Jesus. What does he say?
You got it, Jonah?
I'm just about to.
Who's got it?
Found it. The men of Nineveh will stand up at the judgment with this generation of condemnation.
What is it, Jonah? What's the verse?
12:41. Who's got it?
Condemn it.
The men of Nineveh shall rise in judgment with this generation, and shall condemn it, because they repented and preached of Jonas. And behold, a greater than Jonas is here.
All right, you guys remember that going on in the book of Matthew?
It's okay, Jonah.
He's basically, this is right after he condemns those cities that to today we only know existed because of archaeology and the fact that Bible talked about them. And in the Bible where it talked about them, you know, he says, woe to you. And all those cities that he said, woe to you, disappeared within 100 years. They were gone, wiped off the maps, and became desolate. And until people started to search where they were said to have been, we find out that those cities that Jesus cursed disappeared within 100 years of that cursing. Okay? And so now here we have it, a little bit later in this same little speech. He tells them that will not those people who lived in Nineveh, who heard the words of Jonah, who came in and preached the truth of God, they repented in sackcloth and ashes. Mm-hmm. And now here you have before you the one sent by God, one of the same essence as God, one and the same as God, the Son of God, and you do not repent but mock me. Mm-hmm. They will rise up in that last day and judge you for what you have done. Mm-hmm. That is pretty steep. Mm-hmm. Pretty steep. All right, the next verse is going to be Galatians 2, verses 3 through 5. This is the one we read a little bit earlier. For he is not a Jew, which is one outwardly, neither is that circumcision, which is outward in the flesh.
Are you ready for the verse?
Go for it.
But neither Titus, who was with me, being a Greek, was compelled to be circumcised, and that because of false brothers unawares brought in, who came in privately to spy on our liberty, which we have in Christ Jesus, that they might bring us to bondage. You said through 5, right?
Yeah, that's it. That's it, 2-5. Or that one's fine. All right, so again, we have this idea, you know, that it doesn't have to do with the circumcision. And actually, it is some of these verses why I had decided not to have my boys circumcised. Okay? It was because of the fact that that was just an outward show, that it has to be of the heart, not of the body, to be of this covenant. And so I didn't have it. In fact, the funny story is when the doctor came to circumcise my last boy, he came in and he's like, oh, we're here for the circumcision. I'm like, oh no, he's going to stay a Gentile. And he goes, well, I guess my work is done. And he walks out. So, I mean, it was just kind of funny. I don't know where it came from, just like spur of the moment, you know. Obviously, he didn't get the message that we weren't going to do it, but, you know, showed up anyway. So, you know, the story that I talked about earlier with this is that word, the spy, that they, you know, translate the word spy, it's actually a word that means to press in close by side. So, you know, like I said earlier, you know, if you guys are at the ball game and there's that crazy trough that everybody has to be in, you know, and then having somebody press up really close next to you to kind of see what's going down in your business, you know, that's what they had. That's what the church at this point was doing to say, are you one of us or not? They were spending spies into the bathrooms, you know.
They're getting up in people's business in more ways than one.
Literally getting up in their business. Yes, definitely. You know, so all these things, you know, what Paul's trying to say here is that there are all these outward shows, okay? This is what I talked about, you know, a few weeks ago, about this gang mentality that, you know, with gangs you have to wear their certain colors, you have to say their certain words, you got to know their shakes, you got to know what to say. All right, in the church, I had often said, you know, even before we ever talked about Romans, that I was taught how to look, how to act, and how to talk like a little Christian. Okay, or like in that story that we had heard earlier on the pilgrims regress, you know, he was dressed up, he was told to sit down, shut up, don't move, because the, you know, school teacher or the schoolmaster is going to be very upset with you if you do any of these things. Taught him how to act like a perfect little student, but yet he never had met with, you know, really the landowner. Okay, so all these things, Paul's trying to get this idea across that it is not by your show that you are, you know, in this club or in Christianity. All right, verse 29. But he is a Jew which is one inwardly, okay, inside that heart, that you know, where God says that I will write my law on their hearts. All right, and the circumcision that is of the heart in the Spirit and not of the letter, or the written code. Okay, whose praise is not of men, but of God. Okay, somebody look up Deuteronomy 30 verse 6. Alright, so that last part, this is a very important thing, because in the Christian world we are always looking for this validation from people in church, okay? And if we get that validation, that false validation that, hey, I'm the perfect little Christian, and then whenever they're not around, we go back to how we want, when we want, and, you know, what we want, and it's all for a show, okay? So this last part here, such a person's praise is not from other people, but of God. So one of the marks of this true Christianity, or this idea that you are a child of God, is that you don't care about the praise from men. You care about the praise from God. Jeremiah was definitely one who did not care about the praise of men. He was thrown into jail. He was beaten, okay, because of the fact that he was doing what God said was right. Even when, you know, the false prophet came in, you know, he comes in, he walks in with his arms in stocks and his neck in a stock, you know, and what happens? He starts to prophesy that this is you. If you do anything, if you try to fight, just hand yourself over to them and everyone will live. And then another one raises up and says, no, I have a word from the Lord. He prophesies that they will become triumphant. And then Jeremiah says, surely within a year you will die. Okay? And remember the 7 tests of a true prophet. One of them is that their word comes true. And in a year, guess who was not around anymore? That one who stood up and said that he was prophesying for God, he had died before the walls had ever fallen. So Jeremiah definitely did not care about that. All right, Deuteronomy 30 verse 6.
I got it. And the Lord your God will give to you and to seed a circumcision of the heart, so that loving him with all your heart and all your soul, you may have life.
Alright, now did you guys catch where this is from? All the way back in the book of Deuteronomy. Okay, so from the very beginning, God knew that he was going to have to replace the hearts of these people. God knew that he was going to have to circumcise their heart, because the focus would all become on the outward show of, yes, I am in this covenant. Okay? When in fact that God didn't want this outward show, he wanted the heart. He doesn't care about what happens with the body and how you show that you're a believer. It's about what your heart is saying. What does your lips say when no one's around? You know, what are you doing when no one's around? There's that little old saying about, you know, a person's character is who you are when there's no one around, no one to see, and no one to know what you're doing. That is your true character.
Right.
So the person that you show to everyone else when you're alone and by yourself, are you someone different? In which case, we are kind of like that person in the story from A Pilgrim's Regress, where we put on a mask. We act as this, but when we're by ourselves, we can take the mask off and we can kick back and drink and do whatever we want, because no one's around, nobody's here to see it. I can do whatever the flesh wants. So next week we will continue in Romans chapter 3. We got through...
One thing I was
Yes.
noticed about that very last verse that Jonah just read is that that circumcision of the heart is so that you may have life.
Mhm.
And that's the only way we can have life.
That is very
if that
interesting.
happens.
Yeah, good call. Did you catch that, Nate?
Yes, I caught that.
Yeah, that is a very good point. Thank you, Michael. Okay, any questions about tonight's study? All right, awesome. Next week we start chapter 3. 3 down and 13 to go? Yeah, I think 13 to go. All right.